Hello and welcome to Severe Storms, a Storm Tracker 6 weather special. We're glad you could join us.
Over the next half hour, the Storm Tracker 6 weather team will get you and your family ready for our upcoming severe weather season.
And many of you are familiar with our Weather Wednesday segments. Our weather special consists of the best of our severe weather stories.
Well, up first, we have meteorologist Kendall Wilson answering one of the most basic questions when it comes to summer severe weather. How do thunderstorms form?
There are three ingredients that we need in order to create a thunderstorm. First, we need a source of moisture. In our case, living in the Midwest, this will normally come from winds that advect or transport moisture into our area from the Gulf of Mexico. Second is we also need a warm and unstable air mass. Normally, this is generated from solar heating from the sun. And finally, we'll need relatively cold air above this warm air mass, because now we will have a source of lift in our environment, which is actually the third and final ingredient that is needed, because now this warm air wants to rise up into and throughout the atmosphere. Now, as that warm air rises, eventually it will get high enough and begin to cool and condense into cloud cover. And these clouds will actually continue to grow. Some of these storm clouds can actually grow up to nearly 10 miles high in our atmosphere. Now, at this time, we still have that warm air rising into the base of the cloud. It's actually just generating more energy for our system to tap into. And so now the moisture and instability continues to grow inside of this system. It's allowing our raindrops to become larger and heavier, and eventually they will begin to fall onto the surface. And now that those raindrops are falling out of the base of the cloud, it'll create a consistent cycle of air that flows into and out of the cloud. And so long as we have that air rising into our storm, it will continue. But once it begins to weaken and ceases to exist, our thunderstorm will too. But there are some thunderstorms that can be quite severe, and it all depends on the strength of that up and down draft, or the cycle of air moving into that system. To meet severe thunderstorm criteria, this storm needs to produce winds up to nearly 58 miles per hour and or produce hail right around an inch in diameter or larger. So whenever these storms are severe or not, it's always a good idea to be aware of any potential for any thunderstorm in your area and have a way to receive any severe thunderstorm watches and warnings on any of your mobile devices, because the last place you want to be is outside in a place like maybe a golf course with conditions like these. Back to you.
Thanks, Kendall. Of course, thunderstorms are just one of the ways that Mother Nature can do a lot of damage in a short amount of time, but it's certainly not the only way.
Yes, meteorologist Katie Nicola is here for you now to explain the science behind hailstones. And she shows us why not all hailstones are created equal.
When we talk about severe weather, a lot of times people think about tornadoes or damaging wind, but you can't forget the hail. It comes in a whole variety of shapes and sizes, and some of it is more severe than others. In fact, we have a non-severe category for smaller sized hail, which for us, thankfully, is the most common kind that we see. It can be around pea to marble sized more often than not, which is about a half an inch or smaller. You'll definitely hear it if it hits your roof, but it's not like it's going to punch a hole through it. That happens when you go up in size, and we get to that severe category when you get around quarter-sized or 1 inch in diameter hail. It continues to increase, going up and up. We could even get up to grapefruit-sized hail, which is around 4.5 inches in diameter. That'll do a whole lot of damage, but thankfully, because it's large, it's also very rare. Now, what's interesting with this chart is that you see a lot of common household items on it, ranging from marbles and coins all the way up to eggs. That's because hardly anyone carries a ruler on hand all the time. And since hail can happen at any time, it's important to be able to get standardized units of measurement for those hailstones for reports. That's why, since baseballs are generally the same size no matter where you go, we can put a picture of that next to a hailstone and get a good idea of that size. Now, this hail is really interesting because it can grow incredibly large, and it all has to do with water. Now, that hailstone is spinning up in the cloud, and because there's water in the cloud, it accumulates these layers of ice, looking a lot like what we have with jawbreakers or onions or even trees when you cut them and look at the rings. That's one way that those hailstones hailstones form. Another is that we can actually have smaller hailstones congeal on top of the surface. When that happens, you get some really interesting looking shapes to these hailstones, including, well, some that you can see right here. These are 3D printed replicas of hailstones that I have, and this one happens to be fairly small and fairly smooth. But when you have the process like this, where hail congeals on top of the other surfaces, you get ones that look a lot more like a ginger root. They can be spiky and bumpy, and this can fall from the sky from some severe storms. And if those storms are strong enough and they can keep the hail up in the cloud for a long enough period of time for it to gain even more layers of ice, well, it can turn into something like this. This is the U.S. record hailstone. It fell in Vivian, South Dakota. It's about 8 inches in diameter and just shy of 2 pounds in weight. This can clearly do a lot of damage, and you want to make sure you're warned in case you get hailstones like this or even smaller ones like this. Both of them can cause harm to you, your property, your pets, and that's why we always try to warn you in case those severe storms are headed your way.
Wow, thanks, Katie. Well, coming up next, exactly how do tornadoes form? We'll let you know. Plus,
You often hear a tornado ranked as an EF2 or an EF3, but what does that mean? We'll help crack the code for you when Severe Storms, a Storm Tracker 6 weather special returns. Welcome back. They happen quickly, move quickly, and are among Mother Nature's most destructive forces. But have you ever wondered just how tornadoes form?
And what parts of mid-Michigan have seen the most tornadoes? Chief Meteorologist David Young and former meteorologist Diane Phillips have the answer.
as severe weather season gets underway, it's helpful to know how tornadoes form. Take a look. Here's our 3D cross-section of a thunderstorm. We'll slice right through it, and you can see inside the storm. If the wind field in the atmosphere is right, you get what's called a mesocyclone, which is basically a rotating thunderstorm. And you see how it's spinning faster and faster? Think of a figure skater. When they pull their arms in tight, they spin faster and faster, and that's what happens inside of a thunderstorm. If that continues to happen, you can get what's called a wall cloud, that lowering in the atmosphere, that cloud that hangs under the thunderstorm, and sometimes a funnel cloud. Now, if that funnel cloud, of course, touches the ground, well, that's when things can get deadly, because that's when we're talking about a tornado. It is in contact with the ground. I'm joined by meteorologist Diane Phillips. And Diane, we are no strangers to tornadoes.
That's right. Though the last couple of severe weather seasons have been on the quiet side, it's not uncommon to have tornado warnings or even tornadoes develop here in mid-Michigan.
So even though it's been a while since tornadoes touched down here in mid-Michigan, we still shouldn't let our guard down.
Correct. And there's actually some places in mid-Michigan that we've seen some larger tornado numbers. And let's actually walk over and take a look at the numbers, because though they may be a little lopsided towards the eastern side of our viewing area, everybody is able to see tornadoes here in mid-Michigan. So in our 15 counties, from about 1950 to 2020, we've seen a total of about 325 tornadoes. So though the data, again, may be lopsided, tornadoes can form no matter and wherever, and also at no matter the strength, because a lot of our tornadoes, you can see, are typically going to be on the lower end of the scale. We have seen some EF5 tornadoes, but on those damages and those scales, you can see that it's about EF0 and EF1. That's the tornado strength that we typically see from our tornadoes here in mid-Michigan. So when the next tornado warning is issued, do you know how to get that warning? Well, you can download the Storm Tracker 6 app, which will help to alert you of severe weather watches and also those warnings.
And plus, of course, you can tune in to TV6 or Wlns.com for severe weather coverage from a member of your Storm Tracker 6 weather team, because, as always, we will be here for you.
And now that we know how tornadoes form, what about how we measure their strength?
Well, there's actually a system in place that does just that. It's called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. Chief Meteorologist David Young is back to explain.
It is severe weather season here in mid-Michigan, and that also means it is tornado season here as well. More specifically, we're going to talk about the EF scale, or the Enhanced Fujita Scale, which measures how much damage a particular tornado does and the associated winds with that storm. Thankfully for us, we mostly see weaker tornadoes, EF0s, EF1s. Those can have winds as high as around 85 or 86 miles per hour. That's going to do damage to your shingles, gutters, things like that. Can cause some power disruption interruptions, obviously, as well. As you ramp up the scale towards EF1, now you're talking about winds as high as around 110 miles per hour. That's going to cause more substantial damage to your roof. That's going to down trees, and you'll have more power lines down, perhaps even some significant power outages. EF2, now you're talking about winds maybe as high as 135 miles per hour. That can take the roof right off your house, blow down lots of trees. You typically see widespread power poles down and things like that, so the damage really starts to ramp up. We get to EF3 status, now winds maybe as high as 165 miles per hour. You can lose the entire top floor of your home, fences, trees, things like that blown down. Cars can be flipped over and moved a short distance with that kind of wind power. As you move up the scale even higher to EF4, this is catastrophic damage. These are winds maybe as high as 200 miles per hour. It can scour the grass right off of surfaces. It can pull the bark off of trees. Homes can be completely destroyed because of that. The final EF5 status, then you're talking winds greater than 200 miles per hour. That can literally take the asphalt right off the roads and completely remove houses from their foundations, leaving complete destruction in their path. But again, fortunately for us, we typically see weaker type tornadoes here in mid-Michigan.
Thanks, David. When we come back, have you ever noticed the maps that we use to outline severe weather threats?
We'll break down what those maps mean and how thunderstorm outlooks can help prepare you for upcoming severe weather. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Each year during severe weather season, you'll see the Storm Tracker 6 weather team using color-coded maps to show our risk of severe storms.
Those are called convective outlooks, issued by the Storm Prediction Center. Each of those colors has a specific meaning. Kendall Wilson is here to explain.
Whenever there is a chance for severe weather in the area, you've likely seen a map like this and heard us talk about something called convective outlooks from the Storm Prediction Center. Understanding the terminology behind these risks and outlooks is just another way for you to be prepared for any severe weather situation. In general, these outlooks by the Storm Prediction Center, or SPC, highlights the chance of severe weather on any given day for any given area. Now, the severe weather potential is normally ranked on a scale from 1, or this marginal risk, to 5, or that high risk. When we're in a level 1, or moderate risk, that means that isolated severe storms could be possible, but these storms aren't expected to be widespread and normally are usually limited in both duration and intensity. Main threats highlighted here are just damaging wind and hail right around an inch in diameter or less. When we jumped up to a slight risk, storms could be a little bit more scattered in nature, but still not anything widespread. Even though we are jumping up by one category, storms are still limited in their duration, but it is in this category that we now introduce the chance for right around 1 to 2 tornadoes in the area. For an enhanced risk, or that level 3 out of 5, it signifies an area of greater severe storm coverage with varying levels of intensity possible. So now we have the chance for those numerous severe storms that look to be more persistent, widespread, and or intense than what we saw in the previous 2 categories. Once we move into this moderate risk category, we are now looking at the chance for long-lived, widespread, and intense storms in the area. Areas in this category should not only be aware of the potential for severe thunderstorms, but also several tornadoes as well. The Storm Prediction Center really doesn't issue a moderate risk often, so when it is issued, it is to be taken very seriously, as is the last risk, which is the high risk category shown in magenta here. This risk is reserved where a high confidence exists in widespread coverage of long-track tornadoes and or damaging severe thunderstorm complexes that are expected as well. It is important to note, however, that in all of those categories, from marginal to that high risk, all severe weather is going to be possible. It's just when we go up in the scale that the intensity and duration of the forecasted storms change. So whenever we have any sort of risk in place, it is important that you stay weather aware. Back to you.
Well, thanks for that, Kendall. Up next, we'll talk NOAA Weather Radio as a tool that could save your life.
And we look at another threat during summer, wildfires, when we come back. Okay. Wildfires are a danger we face each year in the state of Michigan. In fact, because of a spell of hot and dry weather, we've already had to worry about them this year.
Well, Chief Meteorologist David Young is here for you to break down how they form and what you need to watch out for.
Well, these are some of the images you see across the state of Michigan each spring and summer as we enter our wildfire season, and we are certainly in that right now. That is the subject of today's Weather Wednesday. I've got some really interesting statistics to look at in terms of wildfires, specifically in the state of Michigan. First, 10 to 12,000 wildfires per year. That's how many we see. Obviously, a lot of those are very small, burning an acre or 2 or 10. But when you get some of the large ones, hundreds or even thousands of acres, those are the ones that we see on the news quite a bit. So there's obviously a lot more than what you see appearing in our newscast. 95% of wildfires are caused by humans. That could be a bonfire burning some leaves, something like that. It gets out of hand, but 95%, that's a pretty high number. Springtime is typically when we see most of our active wildfire season, and that's because we're coming out of winter. There's dead debris on the ground, things like that. It dries out, and if we don't get adequate rainfall, well, then you've got the fuel for wildfires to begin. And it's those ingredients, I thought, which were really interesting. And I thought we'd take a little closer look at that as we really head through our wildfire season. We're going to get some help, though. We're going to bring in our virtual set. First, we'll bring in the grass and, of course, some vegetation, our nice lush trees. I mean, this is what we like to see in the state of Michigan, our beautiful green grass and green trees and spending time outdoors. It is one of the best outdoor states in the nation, maybe a good time of the year. Some of us like to have bonfires. I know I'm guilty of that. As we move through summer, though, we've seen this year, one of the key ingredients, that is dry weather. We've gone through some pretty long stretches of dry weather so far this summer. One key ingredient. The second thing you need, and we see this frequently, windy conditions. We're talking 10, 20, 30 miles per hour. Once you've got that, the final ingredient is just as simple as a spark, light from our bonfire. As that one little spark gets on the ground, it begins to start a fire away from the contained area. And with the wind and dry conditions, it does not take long, and you have got a wildfire spreading very, very quickly. Now, the rainfall is another aspect of the system that we really neglect to talk about frequently, because it doesn't take much dry weather to cause fire danger to go up, but it doesn't take a lot to really tamp down that fire danger. So let's hope the rain continues as we head through the summer months and we can enjoy our nice outdoors. Bottom line, best advice, check ahead with local officials on burn bans and things like that to make sure that your bonfire, or if you're burning something outside, is safe to do.
Well, we certainly face many dangers during the summer months, and not just from thunderstorms.
Yeah, it's important to remember to have a way to get severe weather information quickly. Meteorologist Jim Geyer is here with a look at NOAA Weather Radios.
Well, we're getting to that time now when we really have to keep an eye to the sky, as we might have some more severe weather. We had one down in the southern east part of Michigan, but there's going to be a lot more. We just know it. With me now is Rob Dale, and I want to say, first of all, thank you. And we are starting to get into the time now, aren't we?
Right. Severe weather can happen at any point of the year, but this is really the time where we get most concentrated areas. So we really want to pay attention to those alerts that we have to enable us to stay safe in storms.
So what are the things we should do right away ahead of time?
Well, we like to have you have layers. Layers save lives, we say. So we have outdoor warning sirens in many parts of the area, but those are only for when you're outside. We have cell phones. We have apps to use, so we like those as well. But we also like the ability for weather radios to add yet another layer in those abilities for you to get alerts.
And I understand, too, these radios, they are also in the schools, aren't they?
That's right. Schools, larger businesses, we recommend them really everywhere, but you should have one in your home. They're fairly inexpensive. They're just, again, another tool that will alert you if a tornado might be coming. We, as emergency management, we can also alert you through that system. So if there's some sort of chemical leak that you needed to get out, we can tap into the weather radio system and push those alerts that way.
Boy, that's a good thing to know. Also, people like to go up north. A lot of people go up north, and they're out in the woods having a great time, but sometimes you don't get the signal here, but there's another way, isn't there?
Yeah, so there are ways that your cell phone may not have service, especially in the wooded areas of northern Michigan. I've been there myself, but your weather radio still will work. So if you have a portable, a cranked ability, you can crank this and keep this running. It'll charge your cell phone when you don't need it. But again, it's just another tool to protect you, because especially in those northern areas, you might need a little extra time to get to a safer space. And so this gives you those minutes that really matter. A tornado warning, we want to get as low as you can, if you've got some sort of, you're in a community area where you've got some sort of building or something that will be better than where you're at, you want to find as good a space as you can find in a short time, because there's not a lot of time. You don't want to have to drive away to get somewhere. You want to be near that shelter ahead of the storm.
Okay, some good advice here. Again, it won't be long. We're going to have some rough weather. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we hope you've learned a lot of valuable information to protect your family during our severe weather season.
You can always find the latest weather information at WLNS.com.
Our Storm Tracker 6 weather app is also a great resource for all things weather.
And when severe weather threatens, know that your Storm Tracker 6 weather team will be here for you.
Thank you for joining us.